All right, welcome everybody. This is the Vision Gap, our first episode. This is Tony Zayas, joined by Andy Helko.
Andy Helko, CEO of Insivia, and this is going to be a great discussion. And we're doing our inaugural show for the Vision Gap, which is pretty awesome.
Absolutely, I'm pumped up about it. So this is something we're planning on doing every Friday at this time.
Yeah, after the long week, it's 4 o'clock. People want to wind down.
Yeah.
I think the awesome thing is you've had a long week and you've been probably working in your business, just focused on getting things done.
Yeah.
What I love to see about Friday afternoon is that people can slow down and start thinking about working on their business, because that's what we're going to be looking at with the Vision Gap. It's all about strategy and rethinking the business and innovating and solving problems. So instead of being in the weeds, let's move out at Friday afternoon at 4 so we can start next week and crush it.
Absolutely, and it would have been better with scotch. But
I know I didn't bring the scotch this time, but we promise for future shows we're going to have that 4 o'clock happy hour here at Insivia moving forward. And so hopefully they will too. If they start watching, they can.
You guys got to tune in and
have
your favorite beverage.
Exactly.
So just first things first, just want to let you know we're streaming here both on Facebook and YouTube Live, probably be in some other places as we go. But I want to let you know that we will be responding to comments. We may not do it live as we go because we're going to kind of try to make this a conversation. But what we'd love to hear is feedback, get your comments, your ideas, your questions, and we will either reply to them, respond to your message that you leave in the comments section, or I think some things will be great topics for discussion for us to address as we move forward here.
I'd love to hear, whether people are sending us stuff live, because I love to interact and answer questions, because that's where people get a ton of help is, there's specific scenarios of what they really want to dig into. But also, if you're just sending us messages, you're right. I mean, it's great topics for us to dive into in future shows. So it'll be pretty fantastic as you guys have questions. Just send them in, any way you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So I encourage you to, if you want to follow along with this conversation and kind of what this whole series is going to be about, visit thevisiongap.com. There is the white paper there.
Yep.
Andy put together the Vision Gap. I loved it. When I read it, it was just really great perspective on certain challenges that we're going to get into. Do you want to talk a little bit about, kind of just tell them what it's all about?
Yeah, this is a concept that I've had for a while, and it's really, a big piece of how I look at organizations. And I've had this business for 17 years, and I've worked with hundreds of companies, and it's something that I see over and over, is really that, owners and leadership teams have this vision in their heads of their organization. And I'm like this too. As I go home and I'm thinking about while I drive, I'm thinking about my business in the shower. And so, I've got all this nuance about where I want to go.
Yeah.
But the challenge that ends up happening is I come into the business and you have a hard time defining, articulating, and communicating that vision, not only to your internal team, but for me, to prospects.
Yeah.
And if you can't communicate aspects of the vision and strategy of prospects, you have this challenge in sales and marketing. And then same thing with customers. There's a gap with customers that if you don't have the right customer experience, you don't have some of these other pieces, that there's a disconnect. Yeah. And so the Vision Gap is really about that, is how do we take what's in our head as a leadership team, and how do we really put it in a place that we've defined it really well, we're articulating it in a way that people can truly understand it, they can grasp it and comprehend it, and then how do we communicate it to all those audiences, whether it's the internal team, whether it's our prospects, our customers, or even partners and stakeholders. And so that's really what the Vision Gap is about, is that it truly does exist, and it holds companies back. And when they can figure out how to bridge that vision gap, it makes a huge difference for their business.
Yeah, and I just think it's a really fascinating topic because it touches on kind of all aspects of an organization, a company, the product, the user experience, culture. Something that I like when I first came in here. We're up here in the upstairs conference room. And just on the wall there are statements. Yeah, I actually took pictures of them yesterday, and I posted them to Instagram stories, because I love those. And I love looking at them and knowing that that's part of our culture and our message. And we want our clients to know as well kind of what we stand for. it makes up.
Yeah, these are our value cards. And so, this is a great part of vision is that when you develop a culture, you're looking at things like mission, vision, where are you going? You're looking at values, which really define who you want on the bus and what type of people that you want to have around. And so we, use these everywhere. Is that our values, think smart, open yourself, drive harder. There's 3 more over there. It's really about how do we incorporate them into the business. And this is that communication piece. So we've got these cards, we've got bigger ones downstairs. We even have our little cards that once a week in the organization, people are handing out. And I say, Tony, you know what? This is a great job this week with putting together this show. Here's a drive harder. And so now what I've done is I've communicated, this is our value, and I've rewarded you for it.
Yep.
And so it is so important that we define these correctly because our values do determine the types of people we have in our organization. And when we do our hiring, we say we want people that think smart and that are open to discussion.
Yeah.
And so that helps us define the right ones. We know how to articulate them. So what does think smart mean? It means have thoughtful purpose behind everything you do. And so I'm able to articulate it, and then communicating it, I create some tools that I can use to engage with you. And so that's really what the vision gap is about, is how do we define, articulate, and communicate these elements that are so important to growth.
Yeah. And that's such a strong differentiating factor. Like, I've been on board here a month and a half,
Yeah.
right? So I'm new. When I came in, this stuff stood out to me. When I looked at the website and I saw those, I was like, those resonate with me.
Yeah.
And that was really powerful. And I've even sent people to Insivia.com, and they've gone and they've looked at it and they've commented on it. It says something. It makes you different, what you're all about. Just those values are really powerful. It's going to resonate with some, and others it's not. But everyone's not your client.
Totally. Well, and you know what? It's interesting. We're talking about brand today.
Yep.
And so the one thing that, we were going to talk about is how culture actually impacts brand. And so the thing that I often talk about that people miss in a brand strategy is that they do need things like vision and mission and values, and they need to show that to the outside world because there's prospects out there that they see this and they go, wow, this resonates with me. I'm the right type of customer. And those tend to be the really good customers that you have too when they resonate with your values. And so I think a lot of people forget about these culture things do impact brand, which we're going to be talking about a ton today.
Yeah. But I thought brand was like, I need a logo, Andy. Can you help me out with my brand?
Yeah, that's and I think that's the crux of the conversation with brand is that everyone comes and they say, they say the word brand for some reason. It's like logo, this is our brand. And they think like, oh, Nike has a great brand. And what they think in their head is, wow, they've got this logo that everybody knows and recognizes. But that's not what brand is. And I usually call it brand strategy. And there's 6 elements that I typically look in any brand strategy is that you're first talking about kind of vision and culture. Yeah. What we just discussed is that, you define your values and your BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, your mission and your vision. And these are things that drive the organization forward, give it a future that people are inspired by, and your prospects will be too. And so that's a part of brand. The other is value propositions. And that's one of my favorite is that we really need to define in our businesses what makes us unique and different. Yeah. And I think this is one of the most important steps for any organization is to truly have great value propositions defined and articulated in a way that people can really understand them from the outside world. And the great challenge with value propositions is a lot of times you'll ask someone, hey, what makes your company different? And they'll say, quality. Mm-hmm. What is quality? Quality can be anything, and everybody says it. And that's the challenge with value propositions that aren't well defined. But if you break it down, quality could be defined as, our 5-step quality assurance process. Or quality could be defined by, our handcraft, the way that we handcraft something. Yeah. We break quality down into 5 pieces that make it. And now we're starting to talk about what could be our value propositions, that we create everything by hand, or we, have this great quality assurance process. So when we're talking about value propositions, one, think they're one of the most important things. And
Definitely.
two, I think people get them wrong very often.
Yeah. And I like to think about like brand affinity. Like, what are the brands that like I want to say I believe in, right? That I like
Yeah.
I think about them and I feel good or feel inspired. I feel motivated. Going back to Nike, I'm going to go off script a little bit, maybe get a little controversial
There's a
here.
script.
But yeah,
No.
you didn't get that?
No.
Okay. Uh-oh, we're in trouble
Yeah.
now. But Nike.
I didn't see the teleprompter.
When you think about Nike, right? So just recently, the thing with Nike is not the logo. It's not the swoosh that people have been talking about. Everyone knows that. That's iconic, right? But the one that's been polarizing, and it's made some people like Nike more, and some people not want to buy from Nike, has to do with politics, right? And kind of the stance there. And so that is actually part of their brand because that's values that they either support or don't support. And there's people that are going to be behind that or not behind that. And I think a lot of people just don't really consider all that goes into what truly brand is about and how you can use it to really express what your company is all about.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point because I think, one thing that I talk about a lot, and it's hard to do, but brand and messaging should almost be polarizing if you want it to work well. There are people that that really align with it. And a great example, you see our mugs here. And if you guys don't know, and feel free to send us a message and we'll send you a mug, but they say fuck mediocrity on them. And we really do believe that when you look at our values, that message does tie back to what we believe in our mission and vision. But for some people, that doesn't fit. Sure. And that's okay. But there are other people, and actually a lot of the people that we deal with that see that and go, wow, and they resonate with it and they keep it with them. And so we're doing something that's a little polarizing. And that happens in brand is that you're either putting a stake in the ground saying, this is what I believe strongly, and I really feel like this is my position in the marketplace and how I feel, and that might turn some people off. I think the worst thing to do is be in the middle and be so like mediocre, fuck mediocrity, be so mediocre that, everybody likes you, but no one loves you. No one loves you. And so that's really what it's about. And I think people miss out on that and they're too afraid to be a little bit polarizing and a little bit like, let's make the audience that we really want love us to death.
Yeah, well, that goes to a point I'll just share with everybody, right? This is public conversation, we're broadcasting out there. But when we were talking, just kind of figure out kind of how we're going to get out there and how we're going to kind of take this company to the next level. You said, like, take risks with marketing. And I love that concept because it's, it's the idea of like, love me or hate me, you're going to remember me.
That's right.
And when you're in the middle, nobody does. And
no one cares.
But it's risky. So it's scary for a lot of businesses to think, wow, I can't use language like that. It doesn't have to be language, but that's just as the example. It could be, the political, there could be a lot of things. But if you
just that you believe about the way you do something, if you're in accounting and you think that, the environment's going to change and you want to have a position about this is how accounting should be done and no one else does it that way, that's polarizing.
And there's going to be people who are, all in a tizzy because of that. That.
And we talked about taking risks. One of our values is act bold, and it literally says take risks. Mm-hmm. I mean, because we want to act bold, we want to be bold, and so to take risks is part of our culture.
Yeah.
But going back to brand, so we talked about vision and culture being a big piece, value propositions. The next for me is brand voice, and so brand voice is persona, tone, language, and purpose. And there's a number of words and phrases that you can do with that. We typically look at like a persona can be professional and honest. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do is this persona, tone, language, and purpose help us define a couple things. One, how do we sound to the market? So when we do messaging, we should always come back to this language and our look and our feel and make sure that we sound this way. How do we smell? How do we act? What are we trying to do? And so brand voice is a great thing for any organization to define because what they want to do is give that out to their employees. And if they're creating sales materials, if they're speaking with customers, a brand voice is a good compass that people can go along to.
Yeah.
And now we see that Andrew's MacBook. So that, first mistake of live feed here is that
You don't talk about live feed.
yeah, you don't talk about live feed here. But yeah, that brand voice, I think that so many people overlook it. But if you look at companies, the one that I always use is Uber and Lyft. If you look at their brands and their messaging, Uber tends to have this very like clean, professional, black, bold, simple. And you look at Lyft, it's pink and mustachy, and you look at their ads and their messaging and their website, whimsical, professional. And those are two different brands, but they stay with them so that it becomes consistent and that anybody that sees anything related to them, they get that consistent feel and message.
Yeah.
So brand voice is just so important to me for sure.
Yeah, and this stuff all ties together. So that's a challenge for organizations. How do you tie it all together? And that's why it comes back to everything from culture, brand, to marketing, to I think if we could talk about, I know we'll come back to brand, but maybe how this ties in, experience, right? So customer user experience, that's kind of a part of it as well. How do you keep that going through that?
Yeah. Well, I see our system as like, so we've got this breakthrough system and I've seen it very foundational. It's like you start with culture. This is like this base. And I even have a great graphic that describes like your core values are the life of the company. Your vision is like the life of a leader. Your mission is, 3 years, these things. And so it's got this longevity. And so these things build on each other. Core values should be forever. They should last beyond changes in the organization, vision. And then same thing with brand, that builds on top of culture. Products and the way you present those build on top of those two. And then on down to things like marketing, sales, customer experience. And so it really truly is this pyramid or tower. And if you don't have those things at the bottom, like culture and brand and some of these other pieces defined, the rest is weak, right? So,
and how do you keep that differentiating factor if things like the culture isn't tied to those values, and so you have a sales force that's out there that's given collateral, it's marketing pieces, right? That's built off of the brand. But if you don't have buy-in to those two teams with the culture and the brand building off of that, there's a lack of congruency in that messaging and that the voice doesn't carry on. And the powerful thing about those brands, we talk about the iconic ones, is they have the brand down.
We tried that with a client. It was really interesting. They already had a large organization and they had a product that they had built internally and they were looking at launching to the outside world. But it was really intriguing because the product and who the target audience was for was very different than their culture. And so in our like engagement, we were talking a lot about like, how do you position yourselves and what's your persona, tone, language, and voice for this product? And it was funny because for the main company, it was the opposite of those, of what they wanted. And so we had this long discussion about, okay, so if these are the people inside your organization and how they act and portray, but you've got this product that needs a completely different approach, how are we going to balance that? Because are those people in the organization going to be authentically able to present and sell and market a brand that's so different than their personalities? And so that's a unique scenario. I mean, usually you don't have that because I think the way you go to market is a little bit of the authenticity of the core company, and your product should match that. And so that's a challenge that some companies get into, and you have to figure it out and figure out how all that balances and how that might impact team. Who do you hire and how do you split the company up? So there's some really intriguing stuff along those lines.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Just thinking about introducing. So it was a new like product, or
complete different product from what they had sold as a primary business.
Did they start thinking about those things after the fact of it was already developed? And
I mean, so they already had this, and it was like, oh, we're going to start taking it to market, and started to think about, okay, who's this audience? And the audiences between the two businesses were different. And this is where, some of the things we talk about get into such strategic discussions about the business. And this happens all the time when I'm in these programs discussing, is that you start really understanding your target audience and how you want to present yourself to the world, and you realize that your corporate structure or your product structure needs to change, or the features that you have in a product or whatever it might be, that these things really impact the next 3, 5, 10 years of the way that you're going to take your business to market. So it can get really intriguing.
Yeah.
But to continue on with the brand piece, so we've talked about the culture, we've talked about the value propositions and the brand voice. We've got 6 of these. The next one is really positioning statements. And I always talk about that as your elevator pitch. And I think they're key because they're kind of the godfather foundation of your messaging. Yeah. And so the first thing on your site needs to be that positioning statement that tells who you are and why people should care, what makes you different. And you need several positioning statements. We usually break them up into your short identifier. So we're a growth consultancy. Then you have a flag in the ground. What do we believe? Then you have an elevator pitch. What makes us different? And you've got these different positioning statements that are kind of your core pieces that you define. And those are typically based off of culture, value propositions, what makes you different, and then you take brand voice, how you want to sound. That's how you create positioning statements. And so these things, even within the little pieces of brand, really have to go on top of each other and be a progressive process.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just there's so much more to brand than kind of what meets the eye when you first hear that. Like, people think the logo, the tagline, just basics, and of course that's important. But there's so much, and the repercussions of the way you do something. If should you choose not to address something, incorporate something, tying it into the culture, and just again how everything's connected, and how do you stay authentic and congruent if those things aren't aligned. It can be very challenging.
Yeah, and we always talk about it. If you're going to go out and do marketing and sales and this stuff, if you really don't have things like value propositions and positioning statements, key messages, all of this stuff well defined, you're wasting time and effort. I'm not going to go do a series of ads and a campaign if I don't really have a true understanding of what makes me different in the marketplace.
Quality.
Yeah,
quality. You can't run the quality.
Yeah, that's going to be a great ad. It's just like, these guys, we're quality. You know what I mean? And so, and that's not going to resonate with anybody. No one's going to click on it. They're not going to read an article about the quality of X. But, if you have a true differentiator that, our unique methodology or our top level support team that's, Delta certified or whatever it is, now that's something that you can put a message out to the marketplace and say, work with our Delta certified, support team or whatever it is. Check out our 6-stage unique methodology for changing this industry. I mean, we really want to find those things that are different because they are so much the core of what we're trying to do in marketing and sales and customer experience and product development.
Yeah. So along these lines, it's something that I really am a big fan of is brands that play off of, personalities of the people, again, the culture, right? So whether it be, the founder, CEO, is someone like a public persona, but there's personal brand, and that's become so big, I think, with social media and everything. But I think there's people that are in businesses that they believe that that doesn't apply to them. And I'll give you an example. So we had a couple of guys in this week, young guys, who were shadowing, and I talked about the idea of, in it's professional services setting that they're in, they're actually doing like recruiting, staffing. Yeah. And I told them the power in not, if you're doing marketing for something that's somewhat, kind of boring, professional, buttoned up, having something that's personal, that, putting out messaging that sounds casual, that has a personality to it. Even we've been doing a lot of video, one-to-one messages, and I told them about that, and they were all excited about it. And I said, that's how you grab someone's interest, and that's how you stand out and be different. But the personal side, have you ever worked with anybody that just like had a resistance to that type of thing, or embraced it maybe? Because I think that's an interesting one that's new, that's become newer, kind of in history of the world of
Yeah.
business.
We've had a little bit of both. You have those CEOs and founders that don't want to be the figureheads,
Yeah.
and it's funny in some cases because sometimes they're the big expert in the thing that, makes the business pump, and they want to have a step back. And that's
Hmm.
fine. I think there's ways around that. Other scenarios are you work with companies like consulting firms and things where the people are everything.
Yeah.
And the founders really have these big, great ideas. The people that are on their team are experts with great certifications and experience. And you do want to build personal brands with them. I mean, you're a great example coming here with us is, you already have an audience that's out there on Twitter and other places. And so, for us, it's a value. And for any organization where it's a lot about relationships and people and ideas, which our business is,
Yeah.
you want people with those personal brands as well. So it is interesting, and we have had that scenario before where we're building a brand for a company,
Hmm.
but then you talk about how does that trickle down to maybe key leaders or other people in the organization that you really want to make sure that they resonate with that overarching brand.
Yeah. It's very cool. And I think that that's one that, again, depending on the nature of the company, some have a harder time embracing that,
Yeah.
moving away from kind of I like to say just boring corporate
Yeah.
speak and marketing and whatnot. But I see that as something that personally grabs my attention
Yeah.
whenever there's personality. So the kind of brand persona is very powerful. Whether that's a personal brand or not, it's important to have that voice.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So I was going to ask you, so how do you help companies build kind of their persona and, how they create their messaging?
So more of that like persona, tone, language, and purpose, or just the entire thing. For me, that's the thing that makes us unique. And so talking about our unique value proposition
Mhm.
is we've really tried, and I've tried to build a system around this. So I don't know, I've got this brain that I like to work in logical steps and break things apart into little pieces.
Yeah.
And so for us, the way that we do it is really try and walk people through steps that are exercises that are solving smaller problems that then end up building up to it. And so we do that with like value propositions and the others. With persona, tone, language, and purpose, one, you do have to start and you look at the marketplace. What's your audience look like? And what are their motivations and buying factors? And, what do they resonate with? And then you look at your competitors and see where other people are in the marketplace. And with persona, tone, language, and purpose, we've got a unique exercise where we've got a series of different phrases that associate to each of those groups. And we tend to go back and look at it from two perspectives. One, what is the persona, tone, language, and purpose of your company and the people in it?
Mm-hmm.
And then what is the persona, tone, language, and purpose that appeals most to your highest target audiences? And so you go through this exercise and you're picking these words as a leadership team or whoever you're bringing in. And then you're going through this process of understanding how those map to each other. Where's the delta between who we think we are and what we think our customers want? And it helps you start positioning this place where, in some cases, it's funny, I work with companies and they match up perfectly.
Yeah.
The internal and everyone around the team and what they think their customers work really well. And I tend to push back with people when I've got somebody in the room that I don't think matches what they're saying and push back. But there's magic where sometimes that aligns, and that's great. That means there's something special going on there.
Yeah.
There's other times where they're so different, and I think that's the time where you have to come in and really work through the challenge. Why is that? Why does our audience not fit our internal personality? Are we truly evaluating it right? And just going through these places, these discussions. And it's important. And, I think some people out there might think you're going through all this effort and time and thought process for persona, tone, language, and purpose. But I mean, if that's what's going to drive every message out of our organization, and every time we hire an agency to come in and do a design, or we bring somebody in for customer support, and we can put that in front of them and we say, this is how we sound, this is how we look, this is how we smell, that's a powerful thing for an organization. And so it is worth spending the effort and time getting that right. and connecting who you are as people to who your customers want, and how do you define that so that, again, we're communicating that to everybody, and that it's just something that becomes, it fills that vision gap
Yeah.
that we're talking about.
So going back to looking at it kind of from that founder perspective, having the vision, being the visionary, what are some of the takeaways you've had over the years, just that maybe people can take and kind of run with some ideas, and how do you start to get people to see your vision? Any little quick tips that go along with that?
Yeah, I mean, quick tips, it's always hard. And so if you're talking internal teams,
Yeah.
how you get to see the vision, I think that again, it's something about defining it and articulating it. We have had posters that really define the vision of the organization. It's something that sits up on the wall, and it's mission and vision. Here's our products, and here's all the pieces of what we do. So it's something that people pass by. You have quarterly meetings, and that is a big piece. I'm a big fan of like Rockefeller Habits and Entrepreneurial Operating System and some of these other pieces. And it's really about, how do you create rhythm and consistency in messaging? And so as an organization, once you have these pieces, one, are you creating the tools, things like brand guides and, value cards and other stuff that are tools? But then also, how do you have the right meetings and conversations in the team to make sure that it just becomes part of the life, And I've loved our vision poster that we have, because it's a great tool to sit down when a new employee comes in, just walk through it and say, here's our values and what they mean. Here's our mission vision. Here's our big, hairy, audacious goals that we have as a company. Here's our primary targets, all of these different things that we can really walk through, and someone walks out of that initial stage and they have the vision as part of them now. It's not something that you're just sitting there and hoping they understand because you're talking high level. I'm actually showing them a poster. It's something they can take back to their desk. They have a brand guide. So I do think there's something to, I guess the quick hit is, it is important, whether you've got it super defined or not, have some tools, make it part of the conversation, make sure you're talking about it, because you want your team aligned. You want them to see the vision. You want them to know what your brand is. You want them to know what makes you different. It's crazy to me that I'll walk into companies and you ask someone like, what makes you guys, some random person out on the floor, you say, what makes you different? They stare at you, or you ask them something like, what's your core values? Have no idea. Where are you guys going as a company? What do you want to look like in 5 years? And, it's great. Even leadership teams I'll get with, and I ask them, like, where do you want to be in 3 years? And everyone has a different thing. And it's like, wow, how can you be aligned as an organization, headed in the right direction, all trying to accomplish something if you don't have that? And so it's such a big piece.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I think that there's probably things that, I think there's a lot of work that goes into all this, right? It sounds simple. You say brand,
yeah.
And, you say the vision, and getting, your customers, your teams to understand that. But there's a lot that goes into it. At the same time, that might sound like work. Thinking about just, you've lived it for 17 years, right? So what are some of the things that make your life easier once you have those, you go through the work of creating the strategy and planning these things out? Because I think that's something that's hard, right? Like, that's what we work with our clients and work through these things. And that's something that I know I used to do, like annual planning with business owners. And it's something you really have to pull them aside and get them almost like a little retreat where they sit down and focus on it, because they're not going to do that unless they're forced into a room and they're walked through an exercise. That's work.
Yeah.
But the payoff is that it's incredibly valuable. So how would you say, since you really kind of went through that, because I know you've really evolved over the years, how's that resonated, and what has that done to the way your business operates, and from all, any kind of perspective, from the customer perception?
This is kind of off of what you're asking about, but that's it. We sometimes forget to spend time on these important things. Yeah. And so bringing in an outside perspective, I really believe that, one of the things I really try and do, and some of our other consultants, is be candid and be honest, because one of the things most companies need is someone to come in from the outside and really give a different perspective, push back on ideas. And so you're not going to do that internally. If you're just trying to sit down and do it, one, you're going to skip it really fast just because other things pop up, that email from a client, whatever.
Yeah.
And so if you're not setting the time aside and having someone there to lead you through it, that can be a challenge. The other piece is that if you don't have critical feedback, you're just going to have confirmation bias on what you already think.
And I'm dangerous. I mean,
yeah, and you probably learned, I'm a huge behavioral psychology fan. Confirmation bias is probably one of the biggest Achilles heels of any organization, is that we convince ourselves that what we already believe is right, even if, and it's cool, there's studies that show like someone can be presented information, they'll ignore what contradicts what they think, and they'll just push up what already confirms what they believe. Yeah. And that confirmation bias in organizations can kill us because we're just going along, continuing to believe something that we want to rather than what's the reality, even if we're presented facts that are against
it. It becomes groupthink in that little fishbowl. And to have that third-party perspective is a wake-up call sometimes, but an important one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's that piece. And now I forgot your question. So, because we went on.
I was just saying, over the years, right? How has implementing these, things, the solutions to the vision gap, how has that helped?
Yeah.
And from any perspective, or multiple.
I mean, we know that it aligns the team, all this stuff. But I think the point of what your question is it's the analogy that pops in my head is it's like building a house, and you build this house that's a great foundation, and then over time you can continue to maintain it and improve it. But if you never sit down and build your house and you just put sticks up, your life as a business is a lot harder because you're always fixing things and you're just trying to build one piece at a time.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's something for us that, we develop a vision and we build things like culture and brand and spent the time and effort doing it, that, yes, you update these things. We talked about core values lasting a long time. They should. But then other elements like our mission might adjust as we're going along every 3 years, or how our key messages work for our products, or, what is our elevator pitch. And so but the great thing is you could start from a foundation and you can look at it every year, every 2 years and say, how has it changed? What's changed about the market? What's changed about our audience? And now how do we have to adjust our vision? And then I think it's also easier to articulate and communicate to your internal team because they have a foundation in their minds, and it's not something entirely new.
Yeah.
It's here's the next evolution of where we're trying to go. And that even inspires and excites people. One of the coolest things when I'm working with companies is they'll sometimes bring in employees that aren't typically part of leadership discussions. We go through this program and talk about it. Those are the people in an organization that are the most excited. It's funny. They light up. Like they sit in the room and they go, wow, this is so cool. We're having these conversations. I've never been at a company before that's talked about like what makes us different. And those are the people. It's funny. You have your leadership team. They love this stuff and they love defining it because I think if anything, they love getting it out and putting it in front of others. Yeah. But man, is it the other people in the room that don't typically, aren't typically part of these conversations that they light up when they start thinking, wow, we really understand what makes us different. We really understand where we're going as a company. It's kind of a cool thing to see.
Yeah, I would imagine that employee would feel so rewarding to be part of building that, right? Like whenever we're part of something, we own it and that becomes part of us, right? So that's really cool. I think that's probably a great exercise to involve employees and internal.
Yeah, and we always say that is, I think that's a piece of it. And then we've even, and this is a great tip for people, is while you're going through the process, you can share some of this stuff during, because then it gets people excited to know like, oh, wow, stuff is happening. We're and they're seeing little pieces. And then when it fully kind of comes together and is presented, it's so much more impactful because people have been excited about what they've been hearing about.
Absolutely.
So there's some really cool ways that you can do that.
For sure. Very good. Well, I see a comment there from my man, Josh Oppenheimer. Thanks for tuning in, Josh. Very cool. I think we went longer than I expected, at least today.
Yeah, we didn't. Well, we went through I think the 4 pieces of the brand strategy stuff, which I think in future episodes, what we're going to be doing is really diving into just the brand.
Okay.
So we talk about culture, product, brand, marketing, sales, customer experience. The next couple weeks, we're diving into brand, and we're just really going to dig in on it. So it's going to be pretty awesome to dive in. The other ones that we didn't get to, key messages, which we built off of positioning statements that really eke out into our products and services. And then the last is that brand identity. It isn't just an identity isn't your brand, but it is one of the 6 elements. And this is how I look at it, is you take what you have for culture, value propositions, voice, your identity, your logo, your fonts, your colors. That's what communicates
your
those
visual
things.
depiction.
It's the visual depiction of it. And so it's funny to me too when people go and get a random logo created or something.
Fiverr.
Yeah. How did you get to there? And how does that communicate who you are? And, what's the personality that your audience is looking for? And what makes you different in the marketplace? And so, this brand strategy stuff truly is, if you're starting a new company, it's great to just go through some of this stuff on your own and make sure you've got some idea before you get into it. But most of the businesses we work with are 20, 30 years old sometimes. Yeah. And it's amazing that after that amount of time, they haven't thought that through. So the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking all about this brand strategy, not just those 6 elements, but things like brand guides and how you communicate it to the team and how it's leveraged in marketing. But this brand strategy piece, it's one of my favorite because I really think it is so foundational to success as a company. Yeah. You have to know what makes you different. You have to be able to articulate that to the outside world. Your team has to be on board with it. So I love this brand strategy stuff, and I don't think people should skip over it. So
I think brand is underrated, right?
Yeah.
It's so powerful, and a lot of people just look at it as something just quickly to just get past because we have to. But there's a lot of repercussions of that. There's a lot that really can and should go into it, and that's what's exciting about diving into this stuff. So,
well, and the other piece is if you don't define and articulate yourself, someone else will for you. And so that's the challenge of even social media these days.
Outside influence.
Yeah,
somebody else hijacks your brand.
Yeah, hijacks your brand, or you've got customers or competitors that are saying things about you in the marketplace, and you're not even in control of the conversation. So it's a big piece. I'm excited to dive into it because by the time people watch a number of these shows, they're really going to be able to, go through a lot of this process and understand what they need to be doing. So we're going to have a pretty cool next couple of weeks.
Yeah, for
with
sure.
This.
Awesome. Well, very cool, Andy. Really good stuff here today. I'm going to encourage everybody, please go ahead and give us your comments, your questions, your feedback. Just tell us what you'd like us to, we can answer questions.
Subscribe,
we can address. Subscribe. Be sure to subscribe and tune in. Obviously, the replays will be available, but I want to encourage you to go to thevisiongap.com. The link should be there on your screen just below this video, and download that white paper.
Yeah.
Really good stuff and give you a good sense.
It's a simple white paper. It's not super a ton of text, but it gives you a nice framework for what this concept is and some of the things you really need to pay attention to.
It's something to work through as we go through these. If you're interested, get that and kind of take notes in there because we're going to be going through these pieces.
Great idea.
So awesome. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon. Have a fantastic weekend.
Take care.